Oh, thank you, and welcome back. And if you just joined us during the practice period, welcome to you. So glad you're here with Insight Community of the Desert. And if you have noticed the chat, Michael has put in the next book that is going to be discussed in his book club. So feel free to make a note of that if you would like to. Beautiful idea and amazing speaker and author, Jan Willis. So here we are, and I want to start with 10 words: generosity, integrity, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve, loving kindness, and equanimity. So these are the 10 qualities that it said lead to Buddhahood, also called the paramis. These are the beautiful qualities of heart and mind. And the historical Buddha, the Buddha of our age, Shakyamuni Buddha, and all the Buddhas in the past and all the Buddhas in the future, it said, must practice these beautiful qualities to fullness, to fruition. So we also are invited to explore, practice, and grow to perfect these qualities for our benefit and also the well-being of others. And the word parami comes from roots meaning to carry to the further shore, which is very lovely, especially when you're talking about a path or the spiritual journey, carrying to the further shore. So you might have also heard the word paramita, and they're actually the same. And I wanted to read something by Traleg Rinpoche about the paramis or paramitas. And he translates the word into English as transcendent action. And I like that a lot because it reminds me that these aren't developed apart from or removed from the world, that they're very much developed and expressed in action in how we are in the world, how we relate to this world that we are a part of. And when he uses these words, transcendent action, he says we mean it in the sense that actions or attitude are performed in a non-egocentric manner. So sort of with their own steam. And this is a really helpful lens for looking at these practices, these qualities. So one of my teachers, Gina Sharp, calls the practice of the paramis, this engaging with these beautiful qualities, a radical shift in identity. So shifting away from our limited idea of self towards something much bigger, something essential and liberating. This heart as wide as the world that we hear of. So you could call it your Buddha nature, your higher self, whatever resonates for you. But really, it's the heart that we access when we let go or are in the process of letting go of greed, aversion, confusion. And it's said that in the Buddha's, in the many lifetimes that the Buddha lived before, that he had many different incarnations. And there's a whole series of tales called the Jataka tales that recount all of these different lives. And in each of these lives and each of these stories, the Buddha to be is perfecting the paramis, is working on these beautiful qualities. And there are hundreds of these stories. And so in one, he is a monkey who patiently saves the life of an ungrateful, difficult person. He is a stag who outwits a king and inspires that king to stop killing animals. He's a prince who gives away everything that he owns. He was all kinds of things. He was a swan, he was monkeys, he was a fish, he was tree spirits. And it feels to me like one of the purposes of these tales is not only to show the beautiful quality being developed, but also showing us that it was only over the course of many, many lifetimes that the Buddha completely realized these qualities. And in fact, the tradition says it took 100,000 great eons for him to perfect these paramis. So, not surprisingly, one of the paramis is patience. And there's something very beautiful in that teaching for me because it reminds me, and I need that reminder, that liberation, freedom from suffering, is a gradual practice. If it took the Buddha eons of time, it may take us a while too. It may take me a while. And so there's a sense of, okay, I can rest into that. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. I can keep inclining in this direction. So there's no expectation to get it all right now. Gina Sharp again says, this is not an endeavor of time and space, but outside of it. I like to remind myself of those words when, there's that kind of mind of like, let's make it happen. It's got to happen now. Just letting go of the idea that it has to happen on my schedule. And also remembering that my efforts are cumulative and that they'll bear fruit in their time and are worthwhile in and of themselves. So these are the practices of how we are in the world, and we develop them in daily life in relation to other people, to animals, to the environment, the earth, to ourselves. And we don't know, as Taitetsu Uno pointed out, I mentioned before the sit, how a positive action will reverberate. We don't know the interconnections, the intersecting effects of your actions and my actions and their actions, the karma working itself out. But we can be sure that each positive action, the effect of each positive action extends far beyond our current view and understanding. So that first parami, the very first one on the list, and it's not a coincidence, it's first, is giving, dana, generosity. So the quality of the heart that we know as generosity expressed in action. So in the language of the teachings, Pali, the Pali language, there are two words that we associate with generosity. There's chaga, spelled C-A-G-A, and dana. And chaga precedes dana because it's the intention. It's what informs the act of dana or generosity. So chaga is the intention, that inner sense of generosity, and then dana is the outward expression. And so both are really important, our inner intentions and how we express them. So the Buddha said of giving, he talked about it a lot, but one I wanted to share. He said, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared if there were someone to receive their gift. And this particular form of practice, chaga and dana, was so essential to the Buddha's teachings and his way of teaching that before he taught the Four Noble Truths, before he taught the Eightfold Path, before he taught anything, he talked about dana, he talked about generosity. So along with our meditative practice and our ethics, it's called a pillar of the Dharma. So why would this be? Why would the Buddha teach dana or generous giving before anything else? I, I, I don't know exactly. I have some thoughts about it. In a lot of traditional cultures and the culture of ancient India that the Buddha was raised and taught in, the practice of giving was and is a core value. So it might be that this was a really accessible place for the Buddha to reach new students, this foundational practice, an opening, a virtue, a parami that people were already practicing culturally, and a good that they knew and appreciated. And so, therefore, maybe a launching pad, a place to begin. And we can't simultaneously let go and cling. So when we open our hand and give of ourselves, and we're letting go of self, letting go of separation. So in the act of heartful giving, there's a lessening of the grip of being limited, separate, being concerned with me and mine and myself above all else. And there's a sense of release into community, into connection, into well being together. And this is the right or appropriate mindset to be in as we begin this practice of freedom, this way of letting go. So, this expression, this sense of generosity, and this expression is the start of the path. And it's said that the path actually begins and ends with generosity. Because when the Buddha came to the end of the path and realized full awakening, he spent the last 50 years of his life in generous giving, in teaching the Dharma and offering to support others. So the starting place and the destination, generosity, giving. So a monk once asked a Zen master Baizhang why giving is the gateway to the Bodhisattva path. And Baizhang answered that it's because to practice giving is to practice letting go. And the monk then asked, "What do you let go of?" And Baizhang said, "You let go of narrow views. You let go of the idea that things are small and tight, graspable and possessible." So Baizhang is emphasizing the open and wide spirit of generosity, the no selfness of the open heart. And every single act of heartfelt giving is important, no matter how small, because this moment conditions the next. Generosity expressed now will condition my mind state. And so this brings up the question, how do you teach dana? How do you teach generosity? And you can't really teach an action. Someone can model an action or talk about it, but it's only when you actually do it yourself that you really learn that it becomes yours, that it is yours. And the more you do it, the more it's integrated into your way of being. So then we can approach dana as a place of training, of experimentation, of learning. How does it work in your experience, in the conditions of your life? How does giving feel for you? How does it show up? Where is it easy to give, to express generosity? Where are the places where it's automatic to you? And where is it a little sticky? Where's the edge? And are there ways of giving that come very naturally to you? Like maybe you're very generous with your time, or your attention always ready to lend an ear. Maybe you're generous with material resources. Maybe you are naturally helpful. Seeing a need and filling it is second nature for some of us. Maybe you're generous with a kind word and a smile. So the Buddha's path is a gradual one. Remember, according to those texts, it took the Buddha many, many, many lifetimes to truly develop these beautiful qualities. So we incline the mind and heart again and again to what we call the wholesome or kusala qualities. Just like the metta practice that we might do on Fridays. It's a very gradual opening of the heart and yet a persistent commitment to that process. It's a sort of practice for meeting the conditions of life. And that can be true of our practice of generosity. It can be something that we actively invite ourselves to participate in. So we're bit by bit replacing old conditioning, personal conditioning, cultural conditioning that separates us from others and our innate nobility and beauty. So we all have an attitude, it's said. Norman Fisher, Zen, another Zen teacher, says we all have an attitude, and he defines attitude as stance, the way we hold our bodies, our posture, the way we stride forth into life or hide from life. And he says we come by our attitudes honestly. We get them from our parents, communities, and cultures, from our experiences, traumas, and triumphs. We assume our attitudes reflect reality. We assume they are fixed and unchangeable. So that's the water that we swim in. And the Buddha taught a technology for seeing deeply and freeing ourselves, deciding to make a change, waking to old conditioning. And he says that it starts with generosity. There's that foundational aspect of generosity expressed in the action of giving, chaga and dana. You can start to take a bodhisattva's attitude toward life by practicing generosity and appreciation, he says. The more we give with awareness and heart in whatever way is appropriate, the more we strengthen this foundational attitude of giving. So I want to just share a few thoughts of how I practice dana, chaga, and dana. I'm going to turn the light on though. We're in this interesting time of year where I didn't have to have the light on for a while, but now it's beginning to get a little dark. But one of my personal mantras or rules is never crush a generous impulse. So if I notice the intention in my mind and heart to give, to offer of what I have to benefit another or a group, there's a brightness in that. And then I often notice how rolls in, the clouds roll in. You've already given. It might not be appreciated. Maybe somebody else should give, not you. And then I notice the light of that generous impulse growing weaker. And so I wake up and I ask, what's going on here? Oh, generous impulse. Lovely. This is a chance to practice generosity. How can I support that all the way to action, from chaga intention to dana action, the expression of generosity? And I look at it a little bit too, what are my motivations and would this gift be of true benefit to the recipient? Can I be of benefit in this moment? And in that pause and reorientation, the flame grows stronger again. So Never crush a generous impulse. That's one of my mantras, and that was going on before I got into Buddhism, but it fits nicely in with the Dharma too. Another training that I undertake is to really watch for zero sum thinking. This idea that there's only so much good to go around, and so I have to guard my good really carefully. And I'm not sure who said it, but somebody said, "Give as though there is nothing to lose. Give as though there's nothing to lose." Because there's only gain in giving from a spiritual perspective. Both the giver and the person given to receive benefit from the act of giving. And part of that for me is just letting go of calculations. They gave me this, so I should give them that. Or I can remember some of the early meditation retreats I attended, engaging in these mental calculations. Okay, it's a 10-day retreat. There are 2 teachers, so that's 20 work days. And then there's travel time. And let's see if they got paid this much per hour, that would be this. And then divide that by the number of people on the retreat. Okay, and that's what I should pay. So that's not what I would call at this point in my life heartful giving. That was the market economy conditioning in action. So what about, what happens when I approach the opportunity not transactionally, but as people do in many other cultures, as an expression of connection, of our shared good and well-being, moving from the me to the we. So one of the key supports of the development of generosity is noticing it, is seeing it and celebrating it, appreciating it. So in the Buddha's culture and teaching, giving was celebrated, it was savored, and the teachings offer us some guidelines for the practice of generosity called noble giving, meaning really ennobling or moving us in this beautiful direction of fulfilling the paramis. And the first guideline is giving with kindness and goodwill. So, giving with a generous heart in such a way that the receiver is respected, lifted up, and not put down in any way. Giving not out of obligation. So, the motivation is more allied with the heart energies of love, of care, compassion, of joy, appreciation. Giving with one's own hand. So, not giving at a remove if possible, but offering from hand to hand when you can. And giving what's useful, not fit to be discarded, is what the texts say. So, giving something of real value. And giving what will benefit the recipient. So, making an appropriate gift, something that will support that person or that organization or that being, not just something random, and especially not something unhealthy. But more than what's given, whether the gift is large or small, whatever the gift is, it's the intention and manner of giving that makes the gift valuable. In other words, it's what's in our hearts and minds that's truly important. And we know this, we know this in Western culture too, or at least we say this, um, but it bears remembering. And the Buddha illustrated it with a simile to one of his followers, Vacha. And he said, I tell you, Vacha, even if a person throws the rinsings of a bowl or a cup into a village pool or pond, thinking, may whatever animals live here feed on this, that would be a source of merit, to say nothing of what is given to human beings. So the attitude in the giving is what brings the blessing. So nowhere in the list does the Buddha say, give all that you have, give till it hurts, because it's ultimately not about sacrifice. And the Buddha was about the middle way. But it's about connection and loosening the compulsion that we have become conditioned with to grasp, to cling, to hold on tight to what ultimately can never bring lasting happiness because it's impermanent. So I love the image that I learned early on at ICD from Larry Yang, that you can't simultaneously open the hand to give and to hang on tight. And giving is the heart's sure release. And it can be a beautiful practice to notice the places where you are practicing generosity already. And it may come so naturally to you that you don't notice it. Well, of course I do that. I always do that, doesn't everybody? And yet it's really good to notice and celebrate it. And this is part of the reason that noble giving is giving with one's hand. We place a lot of store in this culture in anonymous giving, and that's an important practice sometimes. But giving with our own hand, meaning directly, not hidden, but connecting to person to person. And when that's in the context of the other elements of noble giving, then according to the Buddha, before giving, the mind of the giver is happy. While giving, the mind of the giver is made peaceful. And having given, the mind of the giver is uplifted. And that's a beautiful place to reflect. How is the heart and mind when you're forming that intention of generosity? And how does it actually feel to make that connection as you share? And how does it feel when you have shared from the heart freely? Having given, the mind, and the Buddha's talking about the mind-heart of the giver is uplifted. And do you ever regret it? I'm very good, personally, at collecting regrets. But as I reflect, I don't seem to find any places where I regret being generous. And maybe there are a few times when I regret not having been generous. But when I've shared what I have with another, I do feel that uplift that the Buddha spoke of, even if it may have not been received gratefully or appreciated or even noticed. As I remember it years later, there is some joy in the heart and mind. I'm still glad that my heart was open enough to make the act of giving and connecting in that way. And we can recollect the generosity of others starting with life, the universe and life that's so precious and yet freely given. And maybe some of us had giving caregivers or parents or other family members or friends that we can appreciate the generosity of. And we can reflect on the gift of the Dharma as we did in the meditation. The Buddha and monastics and sanghas like this and all over the world that have kept the teachings alive and available for 2,600 years since the Buddha's life. All of that through the practice of dana, of generous giving. The Dharma is only alive in our cultures because of that generosity. That's the economy of the Buddhist path, the Dharma freely shared. And I find that fascinating. Could the Dharma have survived and spread around the world through time and culture, through political and social upheaval for thousands of years if it wasn't considered truly priceless and therefore given and shared with love. Maybe that's another reason why the Buddha said it was foundational, because he knew that in order for the Dhamma to be continued and shared for a long time, that generosity was the other pillar, along with ethics and practice. But what other organizations or forms endure that aren't based on giving, on voluntary yet heartfelt support? I reflect like what government around in 2600 years, what corporation is still going to be in business in 2600 years. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Dharma is still available in 2600 years. So the teachings tell us that there are 4 gifts that we can give. We can give material support, such as food and clothing. We can give protection. We can give the Dharma as teachings. And also, very beautifully, that we can give the gift of non-fear. And sometimes these qualities are expressed in the negative, but non-fear, also kindness, care, compassion, love, harmlessness. This is the gift that we give when we say that no one needs to fear us, when we commit to harming none and being of benefit as we're able. The actions of a generous heart are incalculable in value, said Taitetsu Uno. And so, as I was thinking about generosity, I was thinking about who did I experience in my early life as being generous. And I thought of a few people who seemed very giving, but I found that my mind kept going back to a woman named Garcia Mora. And she was a woman who was a friend of a neighbor down the street and who was house sitting for them. And because it was the 70s and we were free-range kids running around the neighborhood, I happened to to meet up with her outside as she was having tea. And she was from Egypt. And she and I got to talking, and for the few days and she invited me to have tea with her, and then invited me back the next day and the next day. And so we'd sit on this patio sipping mint tea, and she would spend, part of her day, part of her afternoon talking to 8 or 9-year-old me about anything and everything, or so it felt. And there was nothing that she needed from me. She didn't need me to do anything. She had no responsibility for me. There was nothing that she needed. But she seemed to enjoy hearing my thoughts and stories as much as I enjoyed hearing hers. And my memory, the felt sense that I have even now, is of just this unhurried, kind gift of her attention, her presence, given freely and with great kindness. And just the effect of that, of feeling seen and valued in a deep way. So much so that, now, like 50 plus years later, I can still feel that. I can still feel that gift. So there's the karma, of a single act of giving. Did she know how that would land? Did she know I would be telling you about this 52 years later? I don't know. But she had that intention, and she took that action, the jaga and the dana. So no one can measure the effects of a single act of giving, for its repercussions are beyond our limited imaginations. So let's sit for a moment and let the words settle. And just maybe reflecting for a minute on your own experience of generosity, your own relationship to giving, maybe where it shows up in your life. And maybe bringing to mind a moment of generosity, giving something large or small. What was in your heart before you gave? What was the intention? And can you remember how it felt in the moment of giving? And what happens in the present as you remember that moment? So, we have a few moments to share. Anyone like to offer your thoughts on giving or experiences or questions or comments? Please raise your hand, or you could probably also just unmute yourself and go ahead. And if you need help, let us know and we'll unmute you. And just as always, we close our practice with a dedication of merit, which is really another practice of generosity, offering the good that we are creating together to others, to all beings. So this is a traditional one. Just as the soft rains fill the streams, pour into the rivers, and join together in the oceans, so may the power of every moment of our goodness flow forth to awaken and heal all beings, those here now, those gone before, those yet to come. So may it be, and thank you so much for your practice. And Jokai will be here Tuesday, and hope to see you again soon.